Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Now at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Mario's down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll to the front. Now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. They throw this left hand. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And on tonight's edition of the podcast, it's time to look at the commitment of Chad Willis, a guy that Carolina had been trying to flip here for the last month or so. They end up getting the job done, flipping him from Cincinnati. We'll tell you all about that, how Carolina was able to do it, and break him down here on this edition of the podcast. We'll also take a look at where the class as a whole stands for Carolina as they sit here right now. They've gotten some, within the last month, some very significant commitments that have really helped this class take a pretty big swoon after it looked like this was going to be one of the lower ranked classes that Carolina has had in a long time. Still might end up being that, but we'll tell you why that may be a little misleading with some of the guys that they have and what the goal should be at this point for Carolina. But as I said, Carolina with a nice job done flipping 3-star wide receiver Chad Willis from Cincinnati. This was a guy that came into the month of June, committed to the Bearcats, took an official visit there to begin the month, and many people were wondering whether or not that would be enough to sort of wrap up his recruitment. But he did have 2 other scheduled visits after he went through the spring and was able to stop by on some of these campuses, eventually received some offers. I don't think he was a guy that ever stopped by Chapel Hill prior to his official visit. But it was in the middle of the month of May where all of a sudden Carolina jumps in. Same thing with Auburn. And from that point forward, both schools end up getting official visits scheduled. But Carolina is the one that ultimately wins out. They had the final say in his recruitment, hosting him on June 19th. Auburn got him on June 12th. And Carolina really showed him everything that he needed. It really, I think, sold him on being a part of the wide receiver trio that they are bringing in this class. As now they've got, the commitment of fellow 3-star wide receiver Anthony Williams and 4-star wide receiver Amari Patterson, who is just dazzling right now at the opening, or did here over the past handful of days. And so that's a guy that a lot of people are feeling really good about. Chad Willis is a guy that's on the rise, and the same thing with a guy like Anthony Williams, who just got ranked. So Carolina with a nice trio here in this wide receiver room here in the 2027 class. But when you look specifically at Willis, he is the number 752 overall prospect in the class, the number 98 wide receiver, according to Rivals industry rankings. He is preparing for his senior year at Orchard Lake St. Mary's Prep in Southfield, Michigan. So Carolina going into the state of Michigan to pull out another commit. He is a guy that is, supposedly close to CJ Sadler, the commit that Carolina landed in this past class here in 2026, maybe the headliner of that class for Carolina. And he's got a relationship with him, apparently also a relationship with Amari Patterson from some of the travels that he's had this offseason. This past season, at the high school ranks, you had Willis finish with 649 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns for a team that went and won the Division II state title in the state of Michigan. It is a little bit of a lower division in the state, but certainly not something that can just be breezed past. The previous year as a sophomore, he hauled in 19 passes for 283 yards and 3 touchdowns in 14 games. So you can see how he grew into a bigger role this past season for his high school. The hope is that he can put up a really strong senior season there for Orchard Lake St. Mary's Prep, potentially lead them to their 3rd straight state title. That would be a really big accomplishment for him. And, if he can be a guy that can potentially get over that 1,000-yard mark, I think that would be the type of production that would really have Tar Heel fans feeling confident. You look at the production that you got from Anthony Williams this past year at Oceanside Collegiate Academy down there in Charleston, South Carolina. He was a guy that, is only going to thrive more, it feels like, probably in his senior year now that he's going to be the number 1 guy for them. And Amari Patterson, Carnell Warren, who is currently a member of the Tar Heels roster for this season, was a guy that led the team in receiving a year ago at Bluffton High School. So now Amari Patterson, a chance to be a 1,000-yard receiver. If you could come in there somehow with 3 1,000-yard receivers their final year at the high school level, that would be some accomplishment for Carolina. And I think it is certainly on the table, although we'll have to see. Willis probably the longest shot out of that group to get it done. But if there is a guy that's going to be able to do that, take that type of leap from his junior season to his senior season, it could be Willis, who measures in at 6'2.5", 215 pounds. And he's a guy that's trending up on a lot of recruiting websites, and for good reason. This is a guy that's coming off of a pretty successful year, judging off of the film that you see from him. There's a lot to like about him. But the other thing is that he is going to be a guy that has slimmed down this offseason. He's added more speed this offseason. And so people believe that that's really going to allow him to take the next step, especially when it comes to winning downfield, when it comes to winning after the catch. That's going to be huge because he's a guy that after the catch has already been fantastic. You look at what he did this past year. He really just did a great job of being able to shake loose from defenders. It wasn't that there was an amazing change of direction or anything like that. He's not a quick, jittery guy. I wouldn't put him in that category, but he just does what he needs to do to make sure that defenders can't hold on to him. He's physical. We'll see if with him thinning down, if that makes it a little more difficult for him to remain physical. But I'm hoping that he hasn't thinned down that much. Thinned down just a bit to add some speed, but keep a little bit of the physicality that he has to his game that allows him to shake guys off and continue down the field. That's one area where Carolina is really looking to improve after last season. They got Jordan Shipp, who I think is going to be really successful in that area after having moments last year as a yak guy. But you need somebody that is going to be able to pile up those yards after the catch, especially if they're going to be running a lot of short routes. And look, the Chad Willis, really strong route runner that creates a lot of good separation, especially on curl and comeback routes. Those are shorter routes. So for him, if he's going to be running a lot of those routes, you got to be able to find a way to turn those plays into bigger gains with what you do after the catch. You see that, that's certainly something that I think you're hoping he's going to be able to expand upon this year with a little bit more speed. You'd like for, him to become a little bit more effective in that deep passing game. We saw some moments where he was effective, especially when they would throw the ball up one-on-one to him. I like what he does in contested catch situations. I don't think he's, a guy that you're going to consistently throw the ball up to him one-on-one and just tell him to go up and get it. I don't think that's necessarily a strong suit, but he has the athleticism to go to win those contested catch situations from time to time. And so now if he has a little bit of speed and can create that separation down the field, that would add a whole other element to his game that Carolina would certainly welcome. I think that would make him a pretty complete receiver. I think that's the only thing that's really standing in his way right now. Doesn't do a ton in the intermediate portion of the game. I think that's certainly an area where you could see him improve as well. Maybe that's something that they try to focus on a little bit more this season with him now that he'll have more speed. But I think this is a guy that, once he gets to the college level, I think he's going to be able to develop and potentially become a 3-level receiver, especially if that speed shows up this year in his senior season. I think this is a great complementary addition to what Carolina already has. And that's the biggest thing, was that when you're looking to bring in a third receiver in this class, you're looking for someone that complements the group that you already have. I think Anthony Williams probably going to be a guy that they're going to look to try to win deep most of the time. You would probably look at him as your X receiver. There, might be some ability for him to move around a little bit, but I think that's more what you're hoping Willis is going to be able to do. Handle more of that Z receiver type of role. Be that guy that, compares similarly to what Jordan Shipp is able to do. I don't think he's anywhere near, or not anywhere near, but he isn't nearly as hyped as Jordan Shipp was coming into into the college ranks. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to have to work a little bit harder to become the player that Jordan Shipp ultimately is. But that's the type of role that I would envision him potentially playing for Carolina, one similar to what you'll see Shipp play this upcoming season. And then you've got your guy in the slot in Amari Patterson. And the good news is that Carolina is done here at wide receiver. This is their trio that they're going to roll with here. There are some other positions where Carolina is going to look to flip guys. I would not think this is one of those positions, especially, as I mentioned, Chad Willis being a guy that's on the rise. If he could become a top 500 type of receiver, you got two blue chip guys right there then, in our minds, at least here on the Heel Tough blog side of things. And then you've got someone in Anthony Williams that I think is one of the most underrated players in this class. If he doesn't become a top 500 receiver, Willis that is, then he becomes one of those guys that I think you talk about in that underrated category for the Tar Heels. So I think regardless, Carolina's in a really good spot at the wide receiver position. You look at the guys that Carolina brought in this last class as well. That would have you of the belief that Carolina is in really good shape at the wide receiver position for years moving forward. I mean, we're talking about 7 true freshman wide receivers on the roster for this season. So even if they do lose some guys, they're going to lose Mason Humphrey. If Jordan Shipp has the type of year that he's capable of having, being an all ACC caliber player, then he could be a guy that ends up leaving early and going to the NFL level. Regardless, Carolina is still going to be in really good shape at that wide receiver position because of the work that Bill Belichick and his staff have done. You can criticize what they've done in recruiting in certain areas, but I think that wide receiver position, that is one area that Belichick and his staff have carried over from the Mac Brown era in terms of being able to take care of it. You look at the class as a whole now, ranked the 34th overall class, the number 7 class in the ACC, and don't really know how much higher they're going to be able to climb. I know there are some big targets out there, people dreaming of Kennedy Green potentially committing to Carolina on July 11th, Trenard Robinson, another guy that, or Trenard Roberts, another guy that is ranked as a 4-star prospect, could possibly commit to Carolina sometime either later on this summer or if he extends it into the fall so that he can get more official visits. regardless, I don't know how much further this class can climb. We've seen some of the recent additions that Carolina has made, and it hasn't made a massive difference in terms of their overall ranking. I think they probably, the safe goal at this point for this class is to try to get inside of the top 30. I think that would be a really, really promising step for Carolina coming off of where they were last year, being a smaller class and really being where they were early in this recruiting cycle. Because at one point early in this recruiting cycle, this was a class that, depending on what site you were on, was ranked in the lower 50s, bordering on being in the upper 60s. And that is definitely not the area that you want to be if you're Carolina, even if you're bringing in a smaller class. This staff has done an amazing job here in the summer, and I'm one that has been very critical of what they've done really since they've gotten here on campus with everything that they've done. But I will tell you that recruiting, you look at what they did in 2026, that was the, whether or not it was the right avenue, which was going all in on the high school class, that can be debated. But when they went all in on it, they did a really good job of bringing in some guys that are going to be able to contribute right away. They did a good job of just loading up that class overall. And so that was a win there. And I think this offseason, what they've done, going out and getting the guys that they have gotten here this summer, and really doing an unbelievable job with some of these guys, convincing them to, pick Carolina over their previous favorites. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Bill Belichick and this staff for what they have done, especially Garrick McGee at the wide receiver position. I think he deserves a ton of praise for landing the 3 wide receivers that he's landed so far. So I think that's one thing that you can give him at this point, is that they've done a really good job of reacting to what was a slow start and getting this class back into a respectable range. Now, can you reach that top 30? If you can get inside the top 30, I think most Tar Heel fans will be pretty satisfied with where you're at. Maybe get another headliner to flip. I think that would really get people comforted, especially if you could get that headliner either at the offensive tackle position or at the defensive tackle position. I think those are the 2 areas that you're going to see Carolina be most aggressive, looking to flip guys. Some of the other areas that you could look for Carolina to potentially add another commit at, talked about running back. That's certainly an area where you could see Carolina add a second commitment, especially with the fact that you've got 2 upperclassmen that are already on the roster in Benjamin Hall and Caleb Jackson. Those are 2 guys that are expected to contribute this year for Carolina, but aren't long for Chapel Hill in terms of where they stand eligibility-wise. And then you do have some younger guys on the roster, but you never know whether or not those guys could potentially transfer out. Also, Charleston French, another upperclassman in that room as well. So 3 of the 7 running backs that Carolina has on the roster this year are upperclassmen. And Damon June and Jalen McGill, both guys will be juniors after next year. So that certainly, is something that I think Carolina is thinking about. Part of the reason why they probably want to add a second running back, if they can, in Trenard Roberts, or potentially another name that pops up later on. We've talked about safety. That's a very important position, it feels like, for Carolina in this class, to add somebody with Coleman Bryson departing after the season is over. You never know some of the other losses that Carolina could suffer at that position with the transfer portal era that we're in. And so you'd imagine that Carolina is going to look to be aggressive there as well. If they can't get Kennedy Green, then it's probably going to go to them trying to flip guys. But I think that at this point, you're hoping that Carolina did enough with their pitch. They showed that he was going to be a priority for them. He's a guy that would have some early playing time if he was to come here to Chapel Hill, and that all works out when he eventually commits on July 11th. Only other positions that I would think maybe Carolina looks to add would be, I don't know if it would be scholarship-wise, but could be kicker or punter, especially, if Jacob Horvath wins the starting job this year as the starting punter. That could be a position that Carolina could look to add to just to get a little more competition in there for the future. Kicker, they probably at this point, I would think that the guy that they're going to roll with is going to be Aiden Burrell, the transfer from LSU, just because he has more experience. But you never know. David Green could be that guy as well. Burrell being a junior, another upperclassman, so maybe that's another area that Carolina looks to add. But I doubt those are going to be scholarship guys. If anything, those are probably going to be guys that Carolina picks up basically late adds to the class. There are no longer preferred walk-ons, but yeah, it would basically be someone that is on scholarship, but is one of the last guys that gets added to the roster for Carolina. So I don't expect you to see any big names handed out scholarships here in the near future. So those are the positions that I think Carolina is still looking at in this class. We'll see if Carolina is able to do anything else, but for the time being, this is the group that they have. Now we await Kennedy Green's decision on July 11th, and then after that, there aren't any other scheduled decisions as of right now. So there are always ones that can pop up out of nowhere. We saw that here with Chad Willis. Now, his was a little bit different because he was a guy that was flipping, so usually those guys make it nearly as public that they're going to make an announcement. But I do think that there is potential for somebody else to pop up here and set their official decision. William Bromlow or Bromlow, the guy who took an official visit to Chapel Hill on the final weekend of official visits back on June 19th out of Canada. That's another guy that could make his decision here sooner rather than later as to whether or not he's going to come and play at Carolina or if he's going to stick with the current league that he's in Canada, maybe go to college somewhere up there. Not sure what exactly his plans are outside of if he was to commit to Carolina, but that would probably be the other guy that I would keep an eye on at this point. Of course, Kelsey Adams, the offensive tackle, who is currently committed to Georgia. He's going to have to make his decision between Georgia, Carolina, and LSU. Most people, though, at this point, as we told you the other night, think that that is an LSU and Georgia decision that will ultimately be made here at some point. Again, he's a guy that's flipping, so never know when that could pop up. But any of those storylines, we will have you covered on the website, HeelToughBlog.com, if any of those break here over the next handful of weeks. But now it is time to turn our attention to the 2026 team and really focus on the guys that are going to be on this roster for this upcoming season. That means that it is position preview time. So make sure that you guys are watching out for the first edition of the position previews. We thought it was going to be tonight. Unfortunately, with all the news that we got, we ended up having to push it back. We love the news that we got. There's some big basketball news that I'll tell you about here in just a second as well. But that means that tomorrow night is going to be our first edition of the position previews. We also pushed back the article, but that'll be coming out in the morning for you guys. So it'll be a look at the quarterback position. We'll break down everything Billy Edwards Jr., Miles O'Neill, Travis Burgess, all of that coming up on the next edition of the podcast. So make sure that you guys are locked in for that edition in the same spots that you are watching this podcast. Also on the basketball side of things, same place that you're watching this podcast, we will be going live tomorrow night as well. We don't know which one we're going to end up doing first. We'll officially decide that tomorrow, but we are going to have it start at 8 o'clock. The second podcast will be at 9 o'clock. And for the basketball side of things, we'll be talking Angelo Brizzi, the transfer from Buffalo. He made it official today. Inside Carolina, the first to report it, that Angelo Brizzi will be joining the roster for Carolina. And so now, as of right now, all of their scholarship spots are full. Carolina is going to have the opportunity if they want it. I would believe, judging off of some of the conversations that I've had with some people that follow the program, that they could still go after a big man if they wanted to. John Holbrook is a guy that is grandfathered in as a former walk-on, so that is a possibility for Carolina. But this way may very well be the last addition that Carolina makes to its roster, so you don't want to miss our breakdown of that addition. Josh watching some more film tonight. I'm going to do the exact same so that I can get a little bit more of an understanding for his game and for what exactly Carolina is bringing into the program. I think it's a sorely needed guard. I will just leave it at that, and we'll get more into it when we join you guys tomorrow night. But all of that coverage is going to be on the Heel Tough Blog Twitter page at Heel Tough Blog, the Heel Tough Blog Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog, and most importantly, over there on the Heel Tough Blog YouTube page. Make sure you head over there. That's the best place to watch tomorrow night. Go ahead, head over there right now. Give us a subscription if you haven't, so that you can watch both editions, and you'll be notified when both editions go live tomorrow night of the podcast that we do here, Four Corners and Heel Tough Blog. So make sure that you guys are locked in for all that. Meanwhile, on the website side of things, HeelToughBlog.com got the article up there about Chad Willis that breaks him down for you guys. So make sure you go back and read that. I took a look at the film. The stats are there for you guys. So make sure you go back and read that article. Josh has the article up there about Angelo Brizzi that you can read tonight. So make sure you learn about Carolina's most recent addition on the basketball side of things. Then, as I mentioned, tomorrow, the big headlining story that will be on the website for Carolina, at least the one that we plan on being there for Carolina. You never know what ends up happening around Carolina athletics, but we are going to have the first position preview that will drop tomorrow. That'll be quarterbacks in depth. Sort of read that one, get yourself prepared for the podcast tomorrow night, where I'll go a little bit more in depth on my opinions of the guys in that room, and then you'll get Josh's opinion of those guys as well. We also want to hear your opinions in the chat. Tarpit9 sent a message in that he is pumped for the quarterback room. Well, if you want to be locked in tomorrow night when we do that podcast, either 8 or 9 o'clock for you. We'll make sure that we put that out officially sometime tomorrow morning so that you guys know the order of the podcast. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's edition of the podcast. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.